When you think about a typical hi-fi setup, usually you would associate it with several hi-fi components at the very least, not just all of this empty space. Now, even though this is the start of a hi-fi component system, or I guess I should say, we do have a hi-fi component system and we do have something else connected to it, having this is not exactly ideal. Now, it was intended to stay like this temporary, but not long term. It's been far too long. We should finally do something about this because I have other hi-fi components that are just sitting around doing nothing apart from collecting dust. So it might as well collect some dust while it's actually connected to something. Just to clarify, there's nothing wrong with the setup as it is right now, but there's just a lot of wasted potential. Before we change anything though, I'll show you how it is right now, and of course later on we will actually make some significant upgrades to this to make it that much better. Now the first piece of equipment is of course the mini disc deck. Now this is awesome, especially alongside the Mac Pro, because this has digital audio output and I have it connected up to the input of this system right here. Now mini disc itself can also record with analog inputs, and of course this system only has analog output, but that's pretty much the extent of anything analog in the setup. Everything else is digital, whether it be physical media or an actual physical file on the Mac Pro itself. But mini disc itself is just really fun to use. It's kind of like a cassette, but it just has a lot of different advantages. I don't have many of these mini discs here, but the ones that I do have, they're excellent to use. And every time I actually play back a mini disc, it shows the channel name right there. Over here we have a couple of remotes, such as a remote for the mini disc system. It's not the original one, but it works with it. The remote for this system right here, and an audio-video switch box. Now this thing is fantastic. It works really well. It has composite and S-video support, but I don't use the video side of things here because, well, we really don't have anything analog video related here apart from just the actual displays on the Mac Pro. And this is using DVI, the other one's using VGA, but this is very useful when it comes to switching between mini disc and the Mac Pro because we only have one audio input here. Now, it does look a bit strange to have composite video input on the system itself, but this is titled as a game input. So the thinking behind this is have this set up somewhere around your TV and you would be able to use the audio from this system instead of the built-in internal speakers on the TV, and the video itself is just a pass-through to go to your television, whether it be a CRT, LCD, anything that supports composite video basically. Now there's a video output jack on the back of the system, but we don't have S-video or anything fancy like that, and even though there's a lot of things we could do with composite video here, I do have other dedicated setups where we actually make use of composite and other video formats. Oh, and as for why I actually have a composite video cable here, well, I have a lot of these, so I figured why not. Now this remote is the factory remote for this Sharp system here. It works fantastic. You know, it's a remote control. What else can I say? But as for the Sony one here, this is not the original one for this deck. It does work. We obviously have mini disc support right here, but as you can see we also have TV support, CD support, and even cassette deck support. It works for pretty much anything Sony related, and considering I have remotes for other Sony systems, you know, ones that are actually dedicated for those systems, I figured this one works well here because I don't have anything else that actually supports mini disc. As for the Sharp Hi-Fi itself, when I first got this, I didn't know where to install it because I have other audio systems and I use those sometimes. So this one was kind of just like an extra, but once I started to use iTunes a lot more, because this has a fantastic built-in audio input, the rest is basically history. It's an excellent hi-fi system to use alongside the Mac, alongside iTunes, and because we have the switch box here, I can easily add other components, so we are not limited by just the single input. Now, as for pretty much any hi-fi system, at least a newer one, it does of course have CD support, but the nice part about it is that this actually has a 5-disc CD changer in the vertical orientation, so it doesn't take that much space, but it still provides the same functionality as a typical CD changer. We have the compact disc logo right there, and we do also have support for CDRs and rewritable discs, but I'm actually not sure if this supports MP3 CDs. It doesn't mention about it in the manual that I have, and as for actually testing it out, I still need to actually make some in the first place, so that'll be something that I'll need to try out in the future. To be honest, I don't necessarily really use this all the time because the Mac is right here, but it is still a nice feature to have. As is common for a hi-fi system like this, it of course has a built-in radio. The volume control is pretty cool. It would have been even cooler if it had some kind of LED backlight or something along those lines. It does have some extra blue plastic here to go alongside the silver, but it really would have enhanced that 2000s feeling if we had some extra lighting here. Technically, you could say that we do have analog audio right here, but the dual cassette decks that we have do not work. Now, I have opened up this unit once before to check if it was a belt issue or something like that. Honestly, I'm not really sure. The belts seem to be just fine, and I'm pretty sure based on the way it tries to start up sometimes, it's some kind of weird electrical, maybe even a mechanical problem. To be honest, it's really not that high on the priority list. We have a much better solution for this, and that's kind of the whole point of today's video. We've already talked about the Mac Pro extensively in other videos, but basically we have iTunes, and if I really want to, I can also use YouTube with the modern version of Firefox that we have. Even though we can play back CDs on the Sharp system, we can also play them back on the Mac and even import them right into iTunes. This right here will be the new addition to the iTunes setup. This is my Technics RSTR311 cassette deck. Now this may not be the fanciest or the coolest cassette deck out there, but it's the one I have, it's the most capable one I have, and more importantly, out of all the cassette systems that I have, this one actually plays back tapes, and fortunately, it has excellent sound quality. So if I'm going to play back something, or better yet, digitize something, it's probably going to be on this thing. It would be awesome to have a professional cassette deck, like one of those super high-end ones, whether it be a Sony ES lineup, or even something like a Technics from the 80s, and if they are overbuilt, then in theory, they should still work just fine. Until then though, we always have this, which still does the job of actually playing back a cassette, but of course you may have noticed that it is a little bit dusty. Now unfortunately this has been sitting for quite a while, but that's nothing a little bit of a clean can't fix. Back in the 80s, Technics used to make some really awesome equipment. Now this example is from 1991, and this is still a decent construction, but around the mid to late 90s especially, the quality of Technics products unfortunately started to fall off, and well yeah, there's really not that much I can say apart from the fact that because this is a model from the early 90s, this still retains some decent quality elements. I haven't even done any maintenance to this apart from just cleaning it up. Not to mention that this has a metal construction. Even though the front here is plastic, it has held up surprisingly well. It really doesn't have any scratches whatsoever, or at least anything visible, but I'm glad to actually finally revisit this and start using this again. Now just because it does work, it doesn't mean that it's completely flawless. The last time I used this, it might have been on deck 1, possibly this one as well, but I don't necessarily remember. But I do distinctly remember that if you press play in the forward position, you know, as intended, there is a small faint clicking noise which I can only suspect to be a potential broken plastic piece. Now we can definitely double check the playback here once we actually power this up, but the last time I used this, I used the reverse direction here because this is of course an auto reverse deck, so this supports both way playback, and when you play back the cassette using this control, there's no clicking noise. It's as if it magically fixed itself. The main reason why I haven't opened this up to see what's causing that problem, as it is, it still works. And I do have some cassettes that I would like to eventually digitize one day with the Mac Pro. So unless I get like a Sony ES cassette deck, something super cool, something high-end, I don't really want to risk it because I don't necessarily need the auto reverse to be completely functional. I just need it to play back tapes, and fortunately it can still do that just fine. Around the back, we have, of course, the Technics name with the model number. It only takes 17 watts of power, and it says that it was made in Japan. What's awesome about this is that it does not have a hardwired power cable, and not only that, you actually get an additional AC outlet here. And I'm going to make use of this with the mini disc system because it doesn't require that much power to begin with, just like the cassette deck here, and I do have the power cable for this specific unit. We also have some awesome information about Dolby noise reduction and HX Pro, and there is nothing digital on this system in terms of digital input or output. Now, I'm sure there's probably some super high-end, crazy cassette decks out there which actually have digital capabilities. There's obviously DCC, but that's its own separate thing. But on this one, we just have line input, line output, and this also has support for a remote control system. So basically, if you have other Technics components, you can control everything with probably just like the main amplifier, even just a remote control. And there's even a synchro edit option here, which is probably for hooking up another cassette deck or maybe even a CD player, so that way you can synchronize everything with just one button. Now, I have no use for these because I don't have any other Technics components, but it is awesome to see, and I know that Sony has a similar system on some of their components. So far, all I've done is place the cassette deck on the top here, and it's going to be one awesome setup. I think, though, before we actually start connecting this up to everything else, we should actually rearrange this to be on the bottom and the Sony on the top. Now, it's not that big of a difference because width-wise, it is basically perfect, but this is still ever so slightly larger, and it's a little bit heavier than this. This is also in better condition, at least cosmetically on the top, so we won't have to look at the scratches on top of this. And because it has this nice beveled edge here, I think it makes more sense to have it on top. It's back. It's finally back. I've been waiting for this to actually be usable again for a long time, and now we actually have a functional cassette deck once again. The mechanism itself just sounds awesome. So it turns out we do have that clicking noise when we play in the forward position. It doesn't affect the playback itself, but I still prefer to just play it in the reverse position here, because at least then it's silent and I won't be worried about anything potentially breaking. Now, this is of course still an old cassette deck, so it's bound to have, you know, old plastics inside. I don't want to mess with it until I actually am able to repair it with spare parts on hand. Believe it or not, this is actually configured to run alongside the Mac Pro at the moment. Now, this is for preparation when I eventually do digitize some tapes, but I don't even have the software installed. Now, ideally, I want to use something like Logic. Obviously, I can easily just use QuickTime, which is what I'm using right now to demonstrate it in action. If I can use Logic, why not make the most of it? Right now, this is configured with this large cable right here. Now, this is probably overkill, but the reason why I have this is because this cable is kind of weird because, well, I don't know how well you can tell, it's painted. I tried to remove this by hand, and even though it is possible, it's very tedious, very time-consuming, and honestly just not worth it. The cable itself is still in good condition though, and we even have some fancy connectors. Obviously, this is a component video cable, but the cable itself is still in good condition. The connectors are in good shape, and this is actually a pretty fancy one where it has the separate audio channels right here connected to it, so you don't have to use a separate cable for that. But because of the way it is right now with all of this here, I'd rather just use it like this because I have component cables that are in better condition. Plus, it always helps to have a solid cable for a good amount of shielding so there's no interference, which will definitely help out when it comes to digitizing cassettes. I wanted to double check the operation of the second cassette deck, and even though the first one plays just fine, the second one is doing a problem that I don't remember it doing before. It's muffled, and the only thing I can guess is that the azimuth seems to be out of alignment. I mean, it kinda sounds better, but now it doesn't even want to play back in the other direction. Like, it started to play back a little bit. Now it's not doing it at all. I don't know if this is a belt problem. It's kind of unfortunate because this is on the record side. Maybe I'm gonna have to open this up. What did I say earlier? That I did not want to deal with this, and yet here it is opened up. I'm honestly not sure what's going on with this because it seems to be working just fine, but for some reason there isn't enough torque once you actually start to play it back in the forward position. But just like on the other deck, it will play back just fine, but we still have the muffled sound problem. I feel like if I start messing around with this, something else will potentially break because there are a lot of plastic components here, and clearly something is going on with this one because we have that clicking noise. Somehow the belts are still in fantastic condition. There's even a large flat belt for the main drive motor, and that does not look like a fun repair to try and change out all those belts. Now, I think the only thing I can really do, at least for now, is to potentially adjust some of the potentiometers, pun intended, and see if it actually makes a difference in the sound quality with this deck here. If for some reason that doesn't improve anything, I guess we're just stuck with the first deck. Awesome! Super fun! Of course something had to go wrong. Nothing can ever be simple, can it? So I guess one day I'll have to try and find another cassette deck. If only they brought back the Sony ES lineup, that would be super awesome. I'm obviously going to still hang on to this cassette deck even if I do get another one, because it is still a decent machine, but right now working on a cassette mechanism is kind of the last thing that I want to do. So I reconnected it here just to test out the potentiometers for deck number 2, and there's really no change at all. Now, it did increase the volume as expected because that's what these potentiometers do right here, but apart from that, there is no improvement in the quality. It is still muffled. It's entirely possible that some of the capacitors here, specifically for the second cassette deck, have gone out of spec, but I don't have anything to actually test it out, and I don't have anything to replace them in the first place. So this is just going to have to be a project for someday in the future, and just to let you know, yes, I did take a picture of the potentiometers before I started adjusting them, and yes, I put them back in their original spot because there's no point in leaving it in a different position considering it doesn't improve it at all. Now this is starting to actually resemble a real hi-fi setup. What's funny about this is that I spent a while trying to figure out how to actually connect both the Sony and this up to one another, but considering we have problems with the deck that actually records, it doesn't really matter at this point. So the Sony itself is still set up the same way with the digital input from the Mac, analog audio to the speakers, but initially I wanted this to still be the same, but the output to go into the line input of the cassette deck, so that way we could use the digital to analog converter of the Sony and use it to pass through things from the Mac, so that way we could actually make some mixtapes. But for now, we just have the line output here with this cable, and this is going directly into the Macintosh. And initially, I also thought about using the AC outlet like I mentioned, but because of the problems we've been having, I don't want to put any extra unnecessary stress on the cassette deck, so the Sony itself is still plugged in directly into the outlet. With the Macintosh connected up to the Sony and the cassette deck connected up to the Macintosh, we can play back the tape through the Sony. So I guess in theory, we could actually digitize these onto mini disc. Now I don't plan on doing that because I'd like to have it all on the Macintosh itself. I feel like at this point there's some kind of cassette deck curse because this has obviously never worked. This has gotten worse since the last time I used it. All the other cassette decks need some kind of repair or maintenance, whether it be old plastics. In some of them I have replaced the belts and it still doesn't work. The only cassette deck that I have that has always been reliable has been this Sony Walkman right here. It continues to play back tapes without a problem. It sounds excellent. I replaced the belts on this. It's working fine. And I even leave this with batteries inside, and the batteries have always been in good condition. The clock itself is not set to the accurate time, but it still continues to work just fine. Cassettes are awesome and they are fun to use, but only the cassette deck curse itself could have made such a cool installation into a disappointing one. I am still really happy that we can play them back in the first place. With a guarantee. And that's how it's done. Did you guys really think I would not record the Bee Gees on mini disc? What do you know, the channel is also right within Minidisc itself. I'm not going to say that this format is better than this or vice versa, because both of them are awesome, but I guess I just have to time travel back to the late 90s or even the 80s and get myself some Sony equipment or even some high-end Technics from the time, which I know would still work. Problem is, the Mac Pro is not a functioning time machine as of yet. What's also really awesome about this is because of the design of the Sony, it looks like it's floating on top here. At least if you look at it from this angle. Like, it should be so simple to set up some hi-fi equipment, yet it took me forever to get to this point. But then again, I guess it is still better than this. So this completely changes everything. The second cassette deck actually works. I can't believe I've done such a silly, stupid, simple mistake, but it actually works. I tried to adjust the azimuth, which honestly I should probably not have done anything to it. I tried adjusting the potentiometers, and I'm very happy that I did not do anything with the cassette deck itself, because there's nothing wrong with it. Despite all of this troubleshooting, I did not clean the cassette head itself, and that should have been the first thing I've done. And what do you know, that actually fixed it. And I guess this is a good reminder to try the simple stuff first. Don't just go for something a bit more complicated unless you've actually ruled out all the potential possibilities. Now, the only reason why I did not bother with this until now is because when I last used the cassette deck, I was using this deck right here, and it was perfectly fine. And to be honest, even when I cleaned it up right now, there was barely anything on the cassette deck itself, so it's always good to double check everything because you never know. Now that we actually have it working again, partly because I'm an idiot, I've taken the output here from the Sony and I've plugged it into the line input, which is how I wanted to do it initially, so we actually have it set up to record again with the Mac Pro or the mini disc as an input. If I only took a little bit more time to actually realize what I'm doing here, this video would have been completely different, but I guess this is the entire experience, right? So I was incorrect again because the way it was set up previously, there's no actual output in terms of listening to the audio that you're recording. So because the Macintosh would output with a digital output here, if we do the analog output with the converter here, and we do the line input, line output, because the Macintosh is doing digital, it's basically just ignoring this as an audio source in terms of actually being able to listen to it. So I've changed it up again. The Sony itself is set up the same as it was previously with the digital input and just the output going to the speakers directly. This is actually connected with the Mac Pro directly, and we have a splitter which helps us do that. So the Sony itself is playing just fine because, again, it's connected up directly with the speakers. But if we want to play back the cassette, we switch to the Macintosh input. And it works just fine. Now, if we also want to record with the cassette, we can do that. And this is just record pause to demonstrate the input. Now there's currently an echo because it's outputting both the Mac and the output from the cassette here. But the reason why is because, like I mentioned, we have a splitter. So we have the Macintosh, and this right here is the cassette. Yeah, I know it's a bit weird because we're using component cables again, but this splitter is one that I have on hand. I'm currently not using it. And it is set up properly for left and right channel audio. Now, to get rid of the echo, one simple solution is to just unplug the Macintosh output, so that way we're just listening to the cassette source itself. And even though that might seem a little annoying, for now it'll work fine because I'm not really making mixtapes all that often, and if I am, I just have to unplug the cable. Right now you can see it's going over the limit here, but we can adjust it from the cassette deck itself. We can adjust the balance, and we can also just adjust the volume from the Mac itself. I was also testing out with the iPod here just to make sure that we have a proper source selection, and in theory we could actually just use the iPod. Now the cables are still a mess, so I'm gonna try and change all that off camera, at least in terms of this nonsense right here. And even though the first part of the video where I was just complaining about this not working, some of the points are still valid, and for the most part that's kind of why I left it as is, because we do still have the mechanical issue of the clicking noise here, and this one still doesn't want to play in the forward direction, but it still does play just fine. The important thing is that the audio is actually good again. Initially, I also wanted to demonstrate a recording test of this, but considering, the recent developments, I think we're going to save it for another video. But if you enjoyed today's video about trying to set this up in a completely ridiculous way, then consider leaving a thumbs up. And if you want to see more awesome content, then consider subscribing. At the very least, hopefully this showed you what not to do, and to always keep it simple unless it's absolutely necessary that you have to look at something more complicated. Keep it simple, especially when it comes to cleaning the cassette deck heads. But that's going to be it for now. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.